Byomkesh Bakshi was the first script I wrote immediately after Khosla. I remember it writing almost simultaneously with Lucky because both those scripts were kind of jumping out of me. I remember sharing it with my wife first, and who's a very integral part of most of my creative process. And she said that this really has something, the tone, the style. But she said, of course, you'll have to write it now. The draft that we see on screen is probably the sixth or the seventh draft. Usually all my scripts go through those drafts, probably not because I'm a perfectionist or anything like that, because the first one or two drafts which I write alone are very silly. My co-writer Urmi, it takes her about 2 or 3 drafts to get out of the silliness and then put some process and order and movement and into the thing, and then go back to the fundamental spirit of the first draft, or the draft zero as we call it, and then go from there.
When I met Dibakar for Oelaki, he had this already one draft of this script. So he had decided on which stories he wanted to borrow, and I didn't particularly like that draft because I thought that it was interesting, but it was all over the place. And then tried editing it because since he had written it, there was no question of me coming in and writing it, because it was already there. Then we tried editing it. That went on for about a year. I made one edited draft, but of course it didn't work because I think we needed to sort of really free ourselves from the original stories. That you take the material, take the best part about the original stories and let go.
For me, Byomkesh was always mid-century Calcutta. Byomkesh stories were written from mid-30s to 1969-70. The last story was written, the unfinished story was published in 1970. Anybody who reads Byomkesh Bakshi can figure out that the most romantic, the most colorful, the most adventurous, the most thrilling part of Byomkesh resides in the stories from the 30s to the 50s. And somewhere in the 40s, they peak. For me, the favorite period is that early period and the first half of Byomkesh, because after that, it becomes, along with India's existence post-independence, gradually more and more disillusioned and drier. Therefore, in a detective film, the setting and the scene is very important. You can't imagine Sherlock Holmes without Victorian London. You can't imagine Feluda without a trip to Banaras or Jaisalmer or to Gangtok, because all his stories were actually travelogues. Byomkesh never traveled much, but Byomkesh's evocation, the stories have an evocation of Calcutta, hugely. And that mid-century Calcutta, pre-independence Calcutta. And that Calcutta, for some reason, became a part of the Byomkesh canon for me ever since I read those stories, when I was 14 or something like that. And that became a part of the template for me, unconsciously so. I always thought that it would be a period story. I didn't want Byomkesh to be a very physical hero. I wanted Byomkesh to be cerebral, and I also wanted Byomkesh to be a bit of a closet intellectual who, when faced with the rough and tumble of real villainy, can be sort of kind of shaken. Also, this is Byomkesh's first case, that everybody has to begin, and when you begin, you don't know, and you make mistakes, and you hesitate, and you're raw, and you're inexperienced, and you fumble, and that's the Byomkesh that I want. That's the Byomkesh that you will see. I needed a young actor, so I looked. And one of the key things of Bengali culture at that point, or of a detective film, is understatement. Detectives are rational people primarily. They're deep down, they're irrational. Otherwise, they wouldn't be detectives. So I think hyperbole or overstatement doesn't come usually to them. So what I noticed about Sushant in all his performances in TV and in films is that he consistently tries to understate. And an actor who tries to be understated in television And in a daytime soap, I think that actor has to be commended very well. And I realized that in Sushant lay something that could bring about Byomkesh. He looks ziddi and he looks vulnerable at the same time. That's what I liked. And then when I talked to him for the first time, I realized that he was prepared to go to any length of preparation to get to the role. I also had a vision that a 24-year-old young man in 43 will not be that different from a 24-year-old young man today, except certain cultural differences. He would be as quick to walk as any other energetic man in 1943. He would be as nervous or as self-assured or as eager or as self-contained as any other person. So I really didn't go for any antiquity of behavior.
अच्छा ये मुझे कुछ नहीं हुआ मैं बिल्कुल ठीक हूँ बोलते बोलते हाथ